Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is our 25th edition of Pinch Hit Friday. Today, I want to talk to you about a concept called recency bias. It's probably the most heavily utilized in the investing world, where basically it's something where investors evaluate their stock portfolio performance based on almost entirely recent events or how they interpret recent events. And what this can do is lead them to draw bad conclusions that ultimately winds up putting them in a position where they make poor decisions relating to their investments. So in other words, when the stock market tanks, people are in the short term very reluctant to invest. And then when the market thrives, they can't wait to invest. And this is in spite of the fact that these might be the exact opposite of the best approaches and inherently at odds with, a fiscally responsible long-term strategy. In other words, your emotions of recent events can make you buy high and sell low, which is the exact opposite of what you want for long-term investing. And obviously, we're talking about this with respect to stocks and bonds and things like that. But in my world, I see two really good parallels in the world of strength and conditioning and baseball development. So first, we often hear athletes talking about, have a process, have a process, have a process, right? So let's assume an athlete sets up a routine, right? Goes through a thorough foam rolling series, then gets into a dynamic flexibility warm up. They're doing stuff with a 3D strap. They're doing their wall slides. They're doing a good sprint prep routine. They've got a good sweat on before they ever pick up a bat or a ball. Everything about their warm up is excellent. And then they go out and they go 0 for 4 if they're a hitter, or they get shelled on the mound in the first inning. They get ground balled to death on poorly hit balls that just find holes. And then that athlete goes and they completely abandon their preparation process, right? They find something entirely different that's off the walls. So they make a haphazard decision on a poor outcome that could really just have been happenstance, like a bloop foul ball actually landed fair and hit the chalk and led to a 3-run double, right? And second, in a different example, an athlete feels great on a day early in the off season, rolls out of bed, got some extra sleep, had a great breakfast, recovered over the course of a weekend and comes in on Monday and decides to push his throwing program forward sooner than originally planned, right? So this is the kid that instead of doing a gradual build to his long toss progression and enhancing some of his chronic workload, his long-term capacity, he hops on the mound and hits 95 in a 50 pitch pen in November and then wakes up the next day and he can't straighten his elbow. So one athlete overcorrected because of a poor outcome and totally adjusted the process. Another athlete basically felt amazing because his process was good and decided just to totally deviate from the original plan. So really the takeaway from all this is that you can't make rash decisions with long-term consequences based on short-term emotions. And that's why it's so important for players, particularly at the youth levels, to prioritize processes over outcomes. And it's why coaches, and parents too, need to always praise effort over outcomes in these youth levels. We always hear the story about the parent that lets into their kid on the car ride home from a game because they bobbled a ball during a rundown or made some poor decision. That doesn't mean their preparation was bad. It just means they got caught up in the heat of the moment and didn't act in a perfect way in an inherently chaotic environment. So you always want to reward processes over outcomes. We always want to praise effort over outcomes, not just at the youth level, but as people advance to higher levels as well. And it's a short podcast today, but I'll leave you with this. I had a great conversation not too long ago with a really smart guy who's kind of on the periphery of the baseball world, but he really understands financial modeling and he likes to casually apply it to sports. He told me that baseball is the sport with the most randomness out of all of the professional sports. I highlighted a couple examples earlier where, a 71 mile an hour ground ball finds a hole and scores a couple runs, or a bloop hit lands on the line, even though the exit velocity was terrible and the out probability was off the charts. You see scenarios like this where the outcome of a game swings based on something that really was just happenstance. And he used the example that in a 7-game playoff series, you'd have to play the series 80 times for the best team to win 80% of the time. So in a game of millimeters, small hinges really can swing big doors, whether it's in determining the outcome of the game or in making an athlete overhaul a process that might not have been bad in the first place. So the take-home point of this podcast is that every successful approach to training avoids the recency bias trap. Just because something happened in the recent past doesn't mean that it should be more heavily weighted in your planning or your execution. In other words, you need to have a smart plan and stick to it. Have a great weekend, and thanks for tuning in. This episode is brought to you by First Form, an awesome supplement company with a comprehensive product offering that I enjoy using myself and with our athletes. Beyond the broad product line they offer, I also love First Form's commitment to ensuring that their products are the highest quality. They meet NSF certified for sports standards for both consistency and purity. Their Formula One protein powder is the best tasting option I've had in over 20 years in the fitness industry, and they've got several great flavors to choose from. I also lean on their creatine monohydrate to support hard training, their collagen for joint health, their magnesium to help with sleep quality, and their fish oil for a variety of health benefits. Our daughters and I also share a love for their high protein meat sticks, which have become a big hit in the Cressey household for school lunches and on the go protein options as we head to gymnastics and softball practices. Of course, First Form products also have been really popular with our athletes at Cressey Sports Performance, and they're used by some of the top performing athletes and most recognizable sports franchises in the world. Above all, the people at First Form are top notch, and that's a rarity in an often unethical business. First Form is dedicated to empowering people on their fitness journeys, and that dedication is matched by only their unwavering commitment to exceptional quality and unparalleled customer service. Check them out for yourself at www.firstform.com/Cressey. That's 1stphorm.com/CRESSEY and get free shipping on your order of $75 or more. Additionally, they're offering amazing 10% more than your money back guarantee if you're not fully satisfied with your purchase. Again, that's firstform.com/Cressey to get free shipping on your order of $75 or more.